The Galactic Military Academy floated in perfect formation around the gas giant Kepler 442b, its crystalline spires gleaming like expensive jewelry against the purple-hued atmosphere. It was the kind of place that screamed we spent way too much money on the architecture and not nearly enough on the cafeteria food. Maya Rodriguez stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately noticed three things. First, the artificial gravity felt like she was walking on the moon. Second, the air tasted like someone had mixed vanilla with industrial cleaner. And third, every single alien in the reception hall had stopped what they were doing to stare at her like she'd just walked in wearing a neon sign that read "Danger, Explosive Human." Cadet Rodriguez reporting for duty, she announced to the reception desk, which was currently occupied by what appeared to be a sentient pile of blue jello with office supplies floating inside it. The jello creature quivered with what Maya assumed was either excitement or terror. Hard to tell with gelatin-based life forms. "Oh dear," it burbled. "Oh my, oh dear. You're the human." Maya supplied helpfully. "From Earth. Third planet from Sol. You know, the Deathworld everyone keeps talking about." The creature's quivering intensified. "Yes, well, we've prepared special accommodations for your unique needs. Reinforced floors, emergency medical teams on standby, hazmat protocols." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Hazmat protocols? I showered this morning." "It's not your cleanliness we're concerned about," squeaked a voice from somewhere near her knee. Maya looked down to see a being that resembled a cross between a butterfly and a small chandelier, complete with what appeared to be actual crystals hanging from its wings. "It's your mere existence. Do you have any idea how dangerous your homeworld is?" "I mean, sure, but I lived there for 18 years and I'm fine." The crystal butterfly creature let out a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Fine? You call surviving on a planet with weather fine? With bacteria? With solar radiation?" Maya was starting to understand why Earth hadn't been invited to join the Galactic Federation for so long. "Look, I'm just here for basic military training. How hard can it be?" The reception area fell silent. Even the background hum of the environmental systems seemed to pause. The jello creature's office supplies stopped floating and sank to the bottom with tiny plops. "How hard can it be?" whispered the crystal butterfly, its voice carrying the kind of awe usually reserved for religious experiences or really good pizza. She asked how hard it can be. Maya looked around at the assembled crowd of aliens, each one more delicate looking than the last. There was a group of what appeared to be living soap bubbles, a few creatures that looked like they were made of spun sugar, and something that might have been a very elegant houseplant with arms. "Right," Maya said slowly. "I'm sensing I may have missed some important cultural context here." The jello creature managed to compose itself enough to process her paperwork. "Cadet Rodriguez, you've been assigned to Training Battalion 7. Your bunkmate is Cadet Wismana from the Ethereal Collective. Please try not to exist too aggressively around her." "Exist too aggressively, breathing heavily, walking with purpose, that sort of thing. Her species considers rapid movement to be a form of psychological warfare." Maya shouldered her bag, which contained exactly 3 changes of clothes, some basic toiletries, and a photo of her dog. The collective intake of breath from the assembled aliens suggested they thought she was carrying a portable nuclear device. "This is going to be interesting," she muttered, following the floating directional signs toward Battalion 7's barracks. Behind her, she could hear the crystal butterfly creature saying, "I give her 3 days before she accidentally destroys something vital just by existing." Maya grinned. She'd been underestimated before. Granted, never by an entire galactic civilization, but there was a first time for everything. Maya's first day of training began at what the Academy generously called dawn, though since they were floating in space around a gas giant, the lighting was more artificially cheerful fluorescent than inspiring sunrise. She'd slept remarkably well considering her bunkmate, Wismana, had spent the entire night hovering 3 feet away from her own bed, apparently terrified that Maya's breathing might create dangerous air currents. "Attention, cadets!" Commander Vextel's voice crackled through the training facility's speakers. The commander himself was a 7-foot-tall insectoid creature with the kind of elaborate uniform that suggested he'd never seen actual combat, but had definitely seen a lot of military fashion magazines. "Today we begin your introduction to basic combat scenarios." Maya looked around the assembled group of cadets. There were about 20 of them, representing what appeared to be the most fragile species in the known galaxy. Wismana looked like she was made of crystallized moonlight. There was a cadet who appeared to be a sentient cloud of glittery mist, another who resembled a very nervous flower arrangement, and something that might have been a walking soap bubble with anxiety issues. Your first exercise, Commander Vextel announced with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested he'd practiced this speech in the mirror, is the weapons familiarization course. Maya perked up. Finally, something that sounded like actual military training. Commander Vextel pressed a button, and a rack of weapons descended from the ceiling. Maya stared. Then she stared some more. Then she wondered if someone was playing an elaborate prank on her. These are the Mark IV-7 foam projection units, the commander said proudly, capable of delivering a stunning blast of impact-dampened polymer foam at velocities of up to 15 meters per second. Maya picked up one of the weapons. It was bright pink, had rounded edges everywhere, and felt like it was made of the same material as pool noodles. There was even a safety label that read, "Warning, may cause mild discomfort if used improperly." 15 meters per second, Maya asked. That's like 33 miles per hour. My grandmother throws a baseball faster than that. The entire training facility went silent. Commander Vextel's compound eyes bulged outward, and what Maya was learning was the insectoid equivalent of shocked horror. Your grandmother, he said slowly, throws projectiles at velocities that would be considered weapons grade in 17 different star systems. She was in a softball league. Wispina made a sound like tinkling glass mixed with pure terror. Deathworlder, she whispered. Your family members engage in combat sports as recreational activities. Maya decided not to mention that her little brother played tackle football. The obstacle course was next, and Maya was starting to understand why Earth hadn't been invited to join the galactic community sooner. The challenging obstacles included a wall that was approximately 3 feet high, a rope bridge made of what appeared to be silk thread, and a crawling section under barriers that were set about 4 feet off the ground. Maya watched Wispina approach the 3-foot wall with the kind of careful preparation usually reserved for bomb disposal. The crystalline cadet spent 5 minutes stretching, another 5 minutes checking her safety equipment, and then began what could generously be called climbing, but more accurately resembled very slow-motion interpretive dance. When Maya's turn came, she simply stepped over the wall without breaking stride. The timing equipment exploded, literally. Apparently it wasn't designed to register completion times under 30 seconds. Cadet Rodriguez, Commander Vextel's voice had climbed at least 2 octaves. You cannot simply ignore the obstacles. I didn't ignore it, I completed it. That wall is regulation height for standard military obstacles. Maya looked back at the 3-foot barrier. Commander, with respect, I've seen toddlers climb higher playground equipment. The sound that came from Commander Vextel was something between a hiss and a whimper. Maya was beginning to suspect that the commander might need some kind of emotional support therapy after this training cycle. The day's final exercise was extreme survival training, which took place in what the Academy called the Hostile Environment Simulation Chamber. Maya entered expecting something challenging, and found herself in what was essentially a very nice garden, with a gentle breeze and temperatures that hovered around 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Your mission, Commander Vextel announced through the intercom, is to survive in this harsh environment for a full 30 minutes while locating the hidden supply cache. Maya found the supply cache in 3 minutes. It was hidden behind a rosebush. She spent the remaining 27 minutes trying to figure out what part of this was supposed to be challenging while her fellow cadets approached the environment wearing full environmental suits, and moving with the kind of caution usually reserved for active minefields. By the end of the day, Maya had accidentally broken 7 Academy records, caused 4 different pieces of monitoring equipment to malfunction, and given Commander Vextel what appeared to be a nervous tic. This is unprecedented, she heard him muttering as she headed back to the barracks. Completely unprecedented. We need new protocols. New safety measures. Maybe new insurance policies. Maya woke up on her second day to find her bunk surrounded by what appeared to be a small army of technicians in hazmat suits. They were installing some kind of monitoring equipment while speaking in hushed, reverent tones about containment protocols and acceptable risk parameters. Good morning, Cadet Rodriguez, said a technician whose species appeared to be a cross between a praying mantis and a very nervous accountant. We're here to fit you with your new protective life support and safety enhancement suite. My what now? Your PLSSCs, the technician said, pronouncing it like plesses with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for root canal procedures. Given your species' alarming tendency towards self-destruction, the Academy has determined that specialized safety equipment is necessary for your continued survival. Maya sat up, which caused 3 of the technicians to dive behind her desk. Self-destruction, I'm fine. I've been fine for 18 years. That's exactly what makes this so terrifying, whispered another technician from behind a portable blast shield. 18 years of surviving on a deathworld without proper safety equipment. The psychological trauma alone should have been fatal. The PLSSEs turned out to be a full-body exosuit that looked like someone had crossed a spacesuit with a bouncy castle. It had padding everywhere, environmental controls that could apparently adjust for temperature variations as extreme as 5 degrees Fahrenheit, and a built-in medical bay that would automatically dispense pain medication if Maya experienced anything more traumatic than a stubbed toe. "This is ridiculous," Maya said, waddling around in the suit like a marshmallow with legs. "I can barely move." "Restricted movement is a feature, not a bug," explained the lead technician. "It will prevent you from engaging in the kind of reckless physical activity that your species mistakes for normal behavior." To make matters worse, Maya had been assigned a personal safety supervisor. Medical Officer Zenton was a jellyfish-like creature who floated around in a mobility scooter and monitored Maya's vital signs with the kind of obsessive attention usually reserved for heads of state or very expensive houseplants. "Cadet Rodriguez, Dr. Zenton said during breakfast, your heart rate has increased by 12%. Are you experiencing a medical emergency?" "I'm chewing," Maya said through a mouthful of what the cafeteria optimistically called protein supplement but tasted like cardboard mixed with regret. Mastication at that intensity could cause internal injuries to lesser species. "Perhaps you should consider a liquid diet." Maya looked around the cafeteria and noticed that every other cadet was indeed consuming their meals through straws. Even the ones who had mouths were using feeding tubes. She was apparently the only creature in the academy who engaged in the apparently death-defying act of biting and chewing. The situation got worse when Maya made the mistake of ordering coffee. The resulting panic was immediate and comprehensive. Alarms went off, hazmat teams were called, and the entire cafeteria was evacuated while a specialized containment unit arrived to dispose of what they called the human's corrosive beverage. That liquid would dissolve the exoskeleton of a Keltaron battle crab, Dr. Zenton said, studying the coffee with scientific fascination. "And you consume it voluntarily. It helps me wake up." "Wake up from what? A coma?" Maya's attempts to explain human dietary habits only made things worse. When she mentioned that humans regularly consume substances that would be considered industrial solvents by galactic standards, 3 cadets fainted and had to be carried away by medical drones. The breaking point came during afternoon physical wellness enhancement, which was apparently what the academy called going outside. Maya had been looking forward to it since she'd been cooped up in the artificial environment for 2 days. What she found was a carefully climate-controlled garden dome where cadets could experience the dangerous thrill of natural lighting. "Please remember," announced the instructor, a being that looked like a walking flower arrangement with chronic anxiety, "that this environment contains unfiltered stellar radiation. Exposure should be limited to no more than 15 minutes to prevent cellular damage." Maya looked up at what was essentially a very mild indoor grow light. "This is sunlight. Technically it's a carefully regulated simulation of Class G stellar radiation, filtered through 17 different safety protocols and reduced to 2% of natural intensity." Maya pulled off her helmet, which caused a collective gasp from the other cadets. Wispna actually shattered a small part of her crystalline structure from shock. "Cadet Rodriguez," Dr. Zenton shrieked. "You're exposing yourself to unfiltered radiation. It's not even as bright as a desk lamp." "Exactly. Do you have any idea how dangerous desk lamps are?" Maya was starting to understand that she might be trapped in a galaxy where the entire concept of dangerous had been completely redefined. These beings lived in a universe where a gentle breeze was considered a natural disaster, room temperature coffee was a chemical weapon, and walking faster than a leisurely stroll was classified as extreme sports. The worst part was that her fellow cadets had begun treating her like some kind of mythical creature. She caught them whispering about her in the hallways, and their conversations usually involved phrases like "drinks liquid metal," "immune to radiation," and "survived atmospheric pressure for 18 consecutive years." By the end of the week, Maya had her own dedicated medical wing, a hazmat team on permanent standby, and what appeared to be a small research grant dedicated to studying how she managed to survive activities like sleeping without life support and breathing unfiltered air. Commander Vextel had developed a full-blown twitch that activated whenever Maya entered a room. After 2 weeks of watching Maya accidentally terrorize the academy simply by existing, Commander Vexetal had reached what could charitably be called a breaking point. Maya could tell because his left antenna had started twitching in Morse code, which Dr. Zentan assured her was either a sign of impending nervous breakdown or an attempt to communicate with his home planet for backup. "Cadet Rodriguez," the commander announced during morning formation, his voice carrying the kind of strained cheerfulness that suggested heavy medication. Congratulations. You've been selected for advanced final examination protocols. Maya looked around at her fellow cadets, who were all staring at her with expressions that ranged from pity to the kind of awe usually reserved for martyrs. Wispina actually started making what Maya had learned was the crystalline equivalent of sobbing. Advanced protocols? Maya asked. Oh yes, Commander Vexital said, his grin stretching wide enough to show far too many teeth. We've designed a special test just for you. Something that will truly challenge a cadet of your unique capabilities. Maya should have been suspicious when they made her sign 17 different liability waivers and a document that appeared to be her last will and testament. She definitely should have been suspicious when the medical team started taking detailed scans of her body for identification purposes. But Maya had been dealing with alien paranoia for 2 weeks now, and this seemed like more of the same. The test facility turned out to be a massive underground complex that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many action movies and had an unlimited budget for dramatic lighting. There were multiple levels, industrial-looking obstacles, and the kind of ominous background music that suggested either imminent danger or a really intense workout video. Your mission, Commander Vexital announced from what appeared to be a heavily fortified observation bunker, is to navigate the extreme survival challenge course and reach the extraction point within the time limit. Maya looked at the course. It actually looked like it might be challenging, which was a pleasant change from the Academy's usual definition of extreme. What's the time limit? 4 hours. Maya blinked. 4 hours. How big is this course? Approximately 2 kilometers of varied terrain and obstacles. Maya did some quick math. 2 kilometers in 4 hours meant she could literally crawl the entire course and still finish with time to spare. Commander, are you sure about that time limit? Absolutely certain, he said, and Maya could hear the barely contained glee in his voice. We've calculated it based on your demonstrated performance capabilities. What Maya didn't know was that the Academy had classified her previous performances as impossible anomalies and assumed she'd been somehow cheating or using hidden technology. Commander Vexital was convinced that 4 hours in a real challenge would finally humble the arrogant human and prove that Deathworlders were just as fragile as everyone else when faced with truly extreme conditions. The first challenge was crossing a chamber where the temperature fluctuated between 68 and 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Maya walked through it in about 30 seconds, while the monitoring equipment registered what the observers assumed were equipment malfunctions. She's not even sweating, whispered one of the technicians in the bunker. Maybe her species doesn't have sweat glands, suggested another. Or maybe, said Dr. Zentan in the tone of someone having a religious revelation, she's already dead and just doesn't know it yet. The next challenge involved navigating an obstacle course in gravity that had been increased to a devastating 1.2 times Academy standard. Maya jogged through it like she was taking a casual stroll through the park, which caused 2 monitoring stations to catch fire and prompted an emergency meeting about whether they needed to evacuate the observation bunker. How is she moving that fast in high gravity? Commander Vexital asked, his voice climbing toward ultrasonic frequencies. Sir, said a technician, consulting his instruments with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who just discovered their math homework had become sentient and started solving itself. According to our calculations, the gravity in her natural environment is approximately 8 times what we consider survivable. The observation bunker fell silent, except for the sound of Commander Vexital's antenna tapping out what might have been either Morse code or a prayer to whatever gods insectoid creatures believed in. The final challenge was supposed to be the coup de grace. Maya found herself in a chamber that had been designed to simulate conditions on an actual death world. There was weather, actual, chaotic, unpredictable weather with wind speeds that reached nearly 15 miles per hour. The lighting varied to simulate natural day-night cycles. There were even some plants that hadn't been genetically modified for safety, which meant they had actual thorns and everything. Maya looked around the chamber and felt genuinely homesick for the first time since arriving at the Academy. It reminded her of the park near her house back on Earth, except cleaner and with better landscaping. She completed the deadly survival challenge in 43 minutes, which included a 15-minute break, where she sat under a tree and enjoyed what passed for natural sunlight in the facility. When she reached the extraction point, she found a team of medics waiting with enough emergency equipment to handle a small war. Cadet Rodriguez, Dr. Zentan said, his voice shaking. How are you still alive? Why wouldn't I be? You've just survived 4 hours in conditions that simulate the surface of an actual death world. Maya checked her watch. It's been 43 minutes. And this place is really nice. You should consider opening it up for recreation time. In the observation bunker, Commander Vexitol was staring at the monitors with the kind of expression usually seen on people who just watched their entire understanding of physics get up and walk away. His antenna had stopped twitching and had gone completely rigid, which Dr. Zentan would later diagnose as acute psychological shock brought on by excessive exposure to impossible human behavior. The Academy's final combat simulation was supposed to be a carefully choreographed exercise designed to test tactical thinking rather than actual combat skills. Maya knew this because they'd spent 3 hours explaining the safety protocols, had her sign another dozen liability waivers, and assigned her a personal team of medics who followed her around like anxious mother hens. "Remember Cadet Rodriguez, Dr. Zentan said for the 15th time. "These are training weapons only. They fire harmless photon bursts calibrated to provide mild sensory feedback without causing actual damage." Maya nodded patiently. She'd learned that agreeing quickly was the fastest way to get through the Academy's safety briefings, which otherwise tended to last longer than most college courses. The simulation arena was designed to look like an urban combat zone, complete with fake buildings, strategic cover points, and what appeared to be the galaxy's most over-engineered laser tag equipment. Maya's opponents were a squad of advanced combat drones programmed to provide appropriate resistance for training purposes. What Maya didn't know was that up in the control room, Technician Blordix was having what could generously be called a very bad day. He'd been up all night recalibrating the training systems. His coffee equivalent had worn off 3 hours ago, and his supervisor kept asking him questions about human compatibility protocols that nobody had bothered to write down anywhere. "Initiating combat simulation in 5 minutes. Blordix announced, staring at a control panel that had been designed by a committee of engineers who'd apparently never heard of user-friendly interface design. "Training weapons are active," Commander Vextol asked from his position behind what appeared to be a full military blast shield. "Training weapons are." Blordix paused, squinting at the display. There were approximately 47 different buttons, all labeled with symbols that looked like they'd been designed by abstract artists having fever dreams. "Training weapons are active." What Blordix had actually activated was the live-fire combat system, which was normally used for testing military hardware and was capable of punching through 6 inches of reinforced steel plating. This was the kind of mistake that normally resulted in court-martial proceedings and very expensive insurance claims. Maya entered the arena feeling more relaxed than she had since arriving at the Academy. Finally, something that looked like actual military training instead of the galaxy's most elaborate safety demonstration. She took cover behind a concrete barrier and waited for the exercise to begin. The first energy blast hit her in the shoulder and immediately reminded her why she'd never particularly enjoyed paintball. It stung like getting snapped with a rubber band, left a smoking hole in her uniform, and made her genuinely annoyed for the first time since arriving at the Academy. "Ow," Maya said, checking the hole in her sleeve. That actually hurt. Up in the control room, pandemonium had broken out. Alarms were screaming, lights were flashing, and Technician Blordix was staring at his instruments with the kind of horror usually reserved for people who'd just accidentally declared war on a peaceful neighboring planet. "Sir," he whispered to Commander Vextol. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" the commander asked, though his voice suggested he already knew it was the kind of problem that ended careers and possibly civilizations. "The training weapons aren't training weapons." Commander Vextol's remaining antenna fell off. Meanwhile, Maya had decided she was getting tired of being shot at by invisible opponents. The second blast caught her in the ribs, which was definitely going to leave a bruise, and the third one grazed her leg, which burned through her pants and was frankly starting to tick her off. "Okay," Maya announced to the empty arena. "New plan." She stood up from behind her cover, completely ignoring the energy blasts that continued to ping off various parts of her body, and walked toward the exit. The problem was that the exit had been sealed for safety reasons, secured by what the Academy proudly advertised as military-grade blast doors capable of withstanding direct hits from capital ship weapons. Maya grabbed the door handle and pulled. Nothing happened. She pulled harder. The handle broke off in her hand. "Oh, come on," Maya muttered, examining the broken handle. Behind her, the combat drones were still firing, apparently programmed to continue the exercise until either she was eliminated or reached the extraction point. Maya looked at the door, looked at the broken handle, and then did some mental calculations about the structural integrity of blast doors versus the combined annoyance of being shot 3 times and missing lunch. She grabbed the edge of the door with both hands and pulled. The screaming of tortured metal could be heard 3 levels away. The blast door, which had been designed to withstand military weapons, tore free of its mounting points with a sound like the galaxy's largest can opener having an argument with a freight train. Maya stepped through the doorway, carrying a 6-inch thick reinforced steel door under one arm like an oversized briefcase. "Hey," she called up toward the observation window. "I think your combat simulation has some bugs in it. Also, your door's broken." In the control room, Dr. Zenton had fainted. Technician Blordix was quietly updating his resume, and Commander Vextal was staring at the surveillance footage with the kind of expression that suggested his worldview had just packed its bags and moved to another dimension entirely. "She tore the door off," he whispered. "Yes, sir." "The blast door." "Yes, sir." "With her hands." "Yes, sir." Commander Vextal sat down heavily in his chair. "I need to make some calls." The emergency meeting that followed what Academy records would forever refer to as the door incident was attended by virtually every high-ranking official in the Galactic Military Command. Maya found herself sitting in a conference room that looked like it had been designed for intergalactic peace treaties, surrounded by beings who kept staring at her like she might spontaneously explode or evolve into a higher life form. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said Admiral Crextes, a distinguished-looking creature who appeared to be part octopus, part filing cabinet, and entirely overwhelmed. Cadet Rodriguez survived direct hits from military-grade plasma weapons. 3 hits, Dr. Zenton confirmed, consulting his medical scanner with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Energy output equivalent to what we'd use to disable a light cruiser. She sustained minor skin irritation and complained about holes in her uniform. And then she manually removed a blast door, tore it clean off the mounting points. Commander Vextel added, his voice still carrying the shell-shocked quality of someone who'd witnessed the impossible. The door weighed approximately 2 tons and was secured with molecular bonding clamps. Admiral Crextes turned to Maya, who was beginning to feel like a museum exhibit. "Cadet Rodriguez, in your own words, could you describe how you accomplished these feats?" Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair, which had been specially reinforced after the sitting incident where she'd accidentally crushed a regular academy chair simply by sitting down with normal human posture. "Well, sir, getting shot hurt a bit, but not much worse than getting hit with a paintball gun. And the door was stuck, so I pulled on it until it came loose." "Pulled on it?" "Yes, sir, until a 2-ton blast door came loose. It wasn't that hard. The hinges were probably old or something." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Admiral Crextes' aide frantically taking notes and what appeared to be several officials quietly updating their personal insurance policies. "Cadet Rodriguez," the Admiral said slowly, "we've been operating under some fundamental misunderstandings about your species' capabilities. Our entire military doctrine may need to be reconsidered." Over the following week, the Academy underwent what could only be described as a complete philosophical transformation. The revelation that humans were essentially walking weapons platforms disguised as friendly, coffee-drinking mammals had sent shockwaves through the galactic military establishment. The first change was to the curriculum itself. The foam weapons were quietly retired and replaced with actual military hardware, though they had to special order equipment rated for Deathworlder compatibility. The obstacle courses were rebuilt with materials stronger than the original Academy structure. The survival training was moved to an actual hostile environment on a nearby moon, complete with real weather, dangerous wildlife, and what the insurance companies referred to as acceptable casualty projections. Maya's fellow cadets adapted to the changes with varying degrees of success. Wispina had requested a transfer to a different program entirely, citing irreconcilable philosophical differences with the concept of dangerous training. The soap bubble cadet had simply popped one day during a particularly strenuous exercise, though the medical team assured everyone this was normal for their species, and they'd reconstitute eventually. Commander Vextel, meanwhile, had undergone what Dr. Zenton diplomatically termed a significant perspective adjustment. His initial terror of Maya had evolved into something approaching religious awe mixed with professional fascination. He'd taken to following her around the academy taking notes, which he claimed were for developing improved human integration protocols, but which Maya suspected were actually the basis for a book he was writing titled, "I Survived Training a Deathworlder: A Commander's Guide to Existential Crisis Management." "Cadet Rodriguez," he said one morning, approaching her with the cautious respect usually reserved for unstable explosives. "I've been reviewing your performance metrics. Am I in trouble again?" "Quite the opposite. You've forced us to completely reconceptualize our understanding of military capability standards. Do you realize that your baseline physical performance exceeds our previous theoretical maximums for military hardware?" Maya looked down at herself. She was wearing standard academy fatigues, drinking coffee that had been declassified as a chemical weapon, and eating what the cafeteria had started advertising as human-compatible nutrition, but which still tasted like cardboard with optimistic seasoning. "I'm really just pretty average for a human," she said. Commander Vextel's antenna began its familiar twitch. "Average," he repeated. "You're telling me that your species produces individuals with greater physical capabilities than this on a regular basis?" "Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't even on the track team in high school." The sound that came from Commander Vextel was something between a whimper and the noise a deflating balloon makes when you let go of it without tying the end. Graduation day arrived with considerably more pomp and circumstance than Maya had expected. Apparently, being the first human to complete galactic military training had made her something of a celebrity. The ceremony was attended by dignitaries from dozens of star systems, most of whom seemed to be there less to celebrate her achievement and more to get a first-hand look at a certified Deathworlder in person. "Ladies, gentlemen, and various other sentient beings," Admiral Krextus announced from the podium, "it is my honor to present the graduating class of Galactic Military Academy Training Battalion 7. Maya stood with her fellow cadets, most of whom maintained a respectful distance of at least 6 feet. Wispina had returned for the ceremony, but was wearing what appeared to be full environmental protection gear, and communicating only through written notes passed via robotic courier. "Cadet Rodriguez," the Admiral continued, "your performance has been unprecedented. You have challenged our assumptions, exceeded our expectations, and occasionally terrified our staff. In recognition of your achievements, and in acknowledgement of the unique perspective you bring to galactic military service, you are hereby graduated with highest honors." The applause was polite but subdued, partly due to the ceremonial nature of the event, and partly because several species communicated approval through methods that didn't involve potentially dangerous activities like clapping. As Maya accepted her diploma, Admiral Krextus leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Cadet Rodriguez, I hope you'll consider staying on as an instructor. We're developing a new program for integrating Deathworlder species into the galactic military, and we could use someone with your perspective." Maya looked out at the assembled crowd of dignitaries, fellow graduates, and academy staff, all of whom were watching her with expressions ranging from admiration to barely concealed terror. She thought about her 2 months at the academy, the friends she'd made despite their existential fear of her morning routine, and the way Commander Vextel had gradually evolved from viewing her as a walking disaster to something approaching a professional colleague. "I'll think about it," she said. Later that evening, Maya found herself in the Academy's newly redesigned recreation facility, which now featured actual Earth-like conditions including variable weather, unfiltered sunlight, and plants that hadn't been safety tested by 17 different committees. Commander Vextel was there too, sitting on a bench and staring out at the simulated sunset with the expression of someone who'd recently had his entire worldview surgically removed and replaced with something significantly more exciting. "Commander," Maya said, sitting down beside him, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Cadet Rodriguez. Why did you really design that final exam? The one where I got shot?" Commander Vextel was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose I wanted to prove that Deathworlders weren't as special as everyone claimed. That given a real challenge, you'd be just as fragile as the rest of us. And now?" He turned to look at her, and Maya was surprised to see something that might have been gratitude in his compound eyes. "Now I realize that the universe is far more interesting than I thought it was, and considerably more dangerous, but in ways that make military service actually mean something." Maya nodded, understanding. "So what happens next?" "Next," Commander Vextel said, "we figure out how to train the next human who shows up. Because after the reports about your performance get circulated, I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more of your species." Maya grinned. "Well, you'll probably want to order stronger doors." Commander Vextel's antenna twitched once, briefly, and then he did something Maya had never seen him do before. He laughed.